Antonín Leopold Dvořák was born on September 8, 1841 in the small village of Nelehozev in Bohemia, about 45 miles north of Prague. His mother was the daughter of one of the prince's stewards, and his father was a village innkeeper. Dvořák grew up all right because his mother and his father were of a good social position. The Bohemian villages he grew up around served as the nationalistic roots he would draw from for many of his compositions. Growing up with his father's innkeeper, he heard about the politics, but as Paul Stefan states in his book about Dvořák, sensible peasant folks were more concerned with crops than politics. Thus, these sensible people would allow Dvořák to later saturate his works with Czech folk music. Dvořák had gone home straight from Cambridge in June of 1892 when he got an official invite to come to America. His music was well known in the New World already. The Slavonic dances and rhapsodies, of course. He realized after being urged by American composer Dudley Buck to come to America, why not follow this odd engagement of a Bohemian musician with a reputation to the States? Thus, he was off to the National Conservatory in New York to serve as a director there. If one Miss Jeanette M. Thurber, the founder of the conservatory, had reached out to Jean Sibelius instead of Dvořák, as initially planned, he wouldn't have been ever so prompted to come to the New World. None of his post-1892 works would have been the same. Dvořák was not only in a new country, but in a new world of music. In New York, with no skyscrapers, very little traffic, and no motor vehicles. Dvořák was surprised to find himself extraordinarily at home, though. By the time he could cable for his children outside of the U.S. in 1892, he was already working on his Ninth Symphony, his last one. It was then that he had just declined his visit to the Carolinas because he wanted to greet his violinist friend Kortberg in Spillville, Iowa. Beginning in January, in 3 weeks, he'd completed the sketches for the first 3 movements. After May of that year, the work was finished, closing its entirely in New York City. It wasn't christened From the New World until mid-November. The New World Symphony and his other 2 American chamber works were declared his greatest works by Alois Skobel, the secretary to Prince Rohan of Vienna. Miss Thurber of the Conservatory published a declaration that in the short time he had been there, Dvořák had accomplished much more than had been expected. He was, she said, an extraordinary worker and exemplary director who, in contrast to most creative spirits, was concerned about every smallest detail. Dvořák recalls on other occasions that compositions of his American period included genuine Bohemian music. He was moved by the spirit of American folk music and the freedom from prejudice of the New World. But in the end, he wrote his own music. He couldn't show any of his students in composition or other American composers how to write American music. He remained himself, and his work maintained individuality. The New World Symphony contains no original American melodies, but is composed out of a spiritual affinity with African American folk music. For example, if we compare certain spirituals like Swing Low, Sweet Chariot with the New World Symphony, or with his Opus 96 quartet, we'll find reminiscence here and there. Another influence of his was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow with the poem The Song of Hiawatha. The old American Indian legends are interwoven in this poem in Longfellow's Hiawatha, and it's depicted as a national hero and savior of Indians. Dvořák found this poem in a Czech translation, and he was spellbound by the dignity of the Indian legends and the description of the American landscape. Each succeeding movement takes place without programmatic significance. His nostalgia for his beloved homeland are ever so present in the symphony, and it's ever so homesick. The slow introduction to the first movement reveals the characteristics of American syncopation. The New World offers the composer 2 themes in the Allegro. The first one, by the English horn, which is unequivocally American, a downward leading tone that is ever so present in the horns. The turkey and the straw theme 2, is introduced by the flute and the oboe, to play to be passed around to different sections of the orchestra. The spiritual Swing Low, Sweet Chariot is the last theme present. It was impossible for a man of his temperament to write anything American. In spirit, he was already in Bohemia. In February of 1895, he heard from Vienna that the Society of the Friends of Music had elected him an honorary member. The same honor was also given to figures like Beethoven and Schubert. This was especially pleasing for Dvořák because it was in Vienna that he drew inspiration for his work on those nationalistic grounds. After the symphony's premiere initially in Carnegie Hall, it was performed twice in the same season. After New York, it was performed in Boston, Prague, London, and Vienna. I would like to close with a quote from Paul Stefan. Romanticism is, after all, an obliteration of all boundaries, a declaration of faith in the oneness of the arts. Music receives its stimuli from poetry precisely as do opera and the symphonic poem. Notwithstanding with Dvořák, both symphonic poem and opera are evoked from the deepest luxuries of his own people, their poetry, legend, and literature.